Got it confirmed. I will now generate the full 3,000-word script in English United States language, in one go with no headings, no scene directions, and with all punctuation removed. Here is the script. Hello. Everyone, welcome back to the channel today. The world is watching Belarus with growing concern as tensions erupt across the nation. Military bases have reportedly been seized, and the future of President Alexander Lukashenko now hangs in the balance. This sudden escalation has sent shockwaves through Eastern Europe, raising questions about the stability of Belarus and the growing influence of neighboring powers in shaping its fate. As the news breaks, officials and citizens alike are scrambling to understand what really happened overnight. And what it means for the future of the region. Reports began emerging early this morning that several key military installations in Belarus have fallen out of government control. Sources from within the Belarusian Defense Ministry suggest that unidentified armed groups stormed the bases, taking control of weapons, stockpiles, and communication centers. These developments mark the most serious challenge to Lukashenko's rule in decades since he first took power in the 1990s. His tight grip on the nation has long been backed by Moscow, but as the situation spirals, there are growing signs that his alliance with Russia may no longer guarantee his survival. For years, Lukashenko has balanced his country between Russian dependence and Western sanctions. But the recent crisis seems to have pushed Belarus to a breaking point. The seizure of these military bases comes after months of rising discontent, protests, and internal divisions within the security forces. There are unconfirmed claims that some Belarusian officers defected to opposition groups, bringing military expertise and equipment with them. Eyewitnesses describe columns of armed vehicles moving toward major cities, including Minsk and Grodno, while state television remains silent in the capital. Minsk heavy police presence is seen on the streets, but many report that the usual security checkpoints are unmanned as confusion spreads. Rumors swirl that Lukashenko himself may have fled or relocated to a secure bunker local. Journalists report that communication with several regional governors has been lost, suggesting that parts of the country are effectively out of central control. Opposition figures in exile have called for calm, but are also urging international attention, warning that the collapse of order could invite foreign intervention. The geopolitical stakes are enormous. Belarus has long served as a strategic buffer between NATO and Russia, and the loss of control over its territory could reshape the balance of power in Eastern Europe. Military analysts warn that if Belarus descends into chaos, it could open the door to a new wave of conflict across the region. Some suggest that Russian forces might move in under the pretext of restoring order, while NATO neighbors like Poland and Lithuania prepare their own defenses amid fears of a wider escalation. Across Europe, intelligence agencies are closely monitoring developments. Satellite imagery reportedly shows movements near the Belarusian-Russian border, suggesting that Moscow is already positioning reinforcements for potential involvement. Russian state media, meanwhile, portrays the events as a Western-backed coup, echoing narratives used in previous regional crises in Ukraine and Georgia. But Western officials deny any involvement and instead express concern that Lukashenko's downfall could create a dangerous power vacuum. Inside Belarus, ordinary citizens face growing uncertainty. Banks and public offices remain closed. Internet connections are sporadic, and panic buying has been reported in several cities. Fuel and food supplies are beginning to run short as transport routes are disrupted. Eyewitnesses report long lines outside ATMs and stores as people prepare for the worst. Some communities have started forming neighborhood patrols, fearing looting or violence amid the breakdown of state authority. The opposition movement, which has operated largely from abroad since the crackdown on protests in 2020, sees this as a potential turning point. Leaders like Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya have called for an emergency transition government and appealed for international support to prevent bloodshed. She stated that the people of Belarus deserve peace and sovereignty, not chaos or foreign occupation. But her calls face skepticism from Moscow and hesitation from the European Union, which fears another frozen conflict on its borders. Meanwhile, the Belarusian military appears divided. Some units reportedly remain loyal to Lukashenko, while others have declared neutrality or even sided with opposition forces. This fragmentation raises fears of an all-out civil conflict. Security experts describe the situation as fluid, with both sides competing for control over key infrastructure, including air bases, railways, and power plants. Reports indicate that the main air defense command center outside Minsk has gone offline, adding to speculation that critical communication systems have been compromised. Neighboring countries are taking no chances. Poland and Lithuania have placed their border troops on high alert, and NATO reconnaissance aircraft have been spotted patrolling the region in recent hours. Washington has called an emergency meeting with European allies to discuss the situation. Officials emphasize the need to avoid direct confrontation with Russia, but acknowledge that the situation is deteriorating faster than anticipated. The White House described it as a red alert moment for Eastern Europe as rumors swirl about Lukashenko's whereabouts. Conflicting reports suggest he may be negotiating with Moscow for asylum or emergency assistance. If verified, this could mark the end of his decades-long rule and the beginning of a new and unpredictable chapter for Belarus. Analysts believe that the Kremlin may attempt to install a more compliant leader or even push for full integration of Belarus into the Russian Federation, a move that would have far-reaching implications for European security. The streets of Minsk remain tense, with armored vehicles stationed near government buildings. While sporadic clashes between loyalist and rebel factions have been reported, gunfire and explosions were heard overnight near the central military district headquarters. Video footage circulating on social media shows soldiers abandoning their posts and civilians waving opposition flags in newly seized zones. The atmosphere is one of uncertainty, fear, and defiance as people brace for what could be the decisive hours of this crisis. International reactions have been swift. The European Union has called for restraint and dialogue, urging both sides to avoid civilian casualties. The United Nations Security Council has scheduled an emergency session to address the unfolding situation. Diplomats warn that Belarus could become the next flashpoint in the ongoing struggle between Russia and the West. Humanitarian agencies are preparing for a potential refugee influx if violence spreads further. The internal economic impact is already being felt. Factories have halted. Production transportation networks are paralyzed, and investors are pulling out funds. Analysts predict that the Belarusian economy, which was already under severe strain, could collapse entirely if instability continues. The ruble has plunged against major currencies, while inflation spikes. Citizens who once relied on government subsidies now face an uncertain future. Observers note that this crisis is not just about politics, but also about identity. Belarus has long wrestled with the question of whether it aligns more with Russian influence or seeks closer integration with Europe. The current turmoil may finally force that choice as control slips away from Minsk. In this environment, regional power brokers are recalculating their strategies, and the question remains, who will fill the vacuum left by a weakened or fallen Lukashenko? As the situation unfolds, international media outlets struggle to verify information amid conflicting reports. State television continues to broadcast patriotic music and pre-recorded statements, while social media fills the gap with raw footage and first-hand accounts. Global audiences watch as Belarus becomes the center of a new geopolitical storm. The sense of urgency grows as both internal and external players maneuver for control. In Washington and Brussels, policy experts are already debating possible outcomes. One scenario involves a swift Russian intervention that restores order but cements Moscow's control. Another envisions a pro-Western government emerging through chaos, though such a shift would likely face immediate resistance from the Kremlin and its allies. Still, others fear a prolonged conflict that could destabilize the entire region from the Baltics to Ukraine. The coming days will determine the fate of Belarus and perhaps the broader balance of power in Europe. What began as a domestic security breach has now escalated into a potential continental crisis, with Lukashenko's leadership in question and his army splintered. Belarus stands at the edge of a dangerous precipice the world watches closely, hoping that diplomacy can prevail before the situation spirals further. Even as chaos reigns, there are reports of quiet back-channel discussions between Russian and European diplomats, suggesting that behind the scenes, both sides are searching for a way to contain the crisis, yet trust remains low. Each move is viewed through the lens of suspicion and strategic interest. The stakes are immense, and the consequences of miscalculation could be catastrophic for the region.